RISEC concludes second training for collation officers ahead of local government election. Rights group questions sole administrators' intent for verification of River State civil servants and pensioners. NCAA insists passengers must switch off phones during flights. On the foreign scene, Russians welcome idea of putting a Zelensky meeting. Now, the detail. The River State Independent Electoral Commission RISEC has concluded the second round of training for 319 ward collation and returning officers ahead of the August 30 local government election in the state. In a statement, the Chairman Chief Electoral Officer Michael Ekbali-Ode said the second phase of training was in line with the Commission's commitment to building competence, capability and professionalism among its election day ad hoc staff. Ekbali-Ode explained that he directed the second round of training for the 319 ward collation and returning officers, which took place today at the RISEC headquarters in Port Harcourt. Meanwhile, the final list of successful candidates released by the River State Independent Electoral Commission RISEC ahead of the August 30 local government election has begun generating reactions. A stakeholder from Andoni, Ima Owaji Shedrack, described the publication of the authentic list as a timely step that will help guide the electorate and give them clarity ahead of the elections. Shedrack explained that the clarification was necessary following days of speculation in some quarters that more than one candidate had emerged in certain local government areas. Speaking of the Andoni election, Shedrack expressed confidence that the exercise will be peaceful, adding that the people of the area have resolved to vote in unity.
Releasing the final list of candidates is a good step in the right direction that will clear the doubts or speculations across quarters and divides that some LGAs are producing or two candidates are emerging at some LGAs. Well, for that of Andoni, it's a different ball game. We just have just one candidate who is Lucky Otu and his running mate Rachel Abigban.
Tension is rising at the University of Port Harcourt as some students contesting positions in the Student Union Government SUG elections have accused the Electoral Committee of bias, alleging that they were disqualified without valid reasons. One of the affected students promised Chisholm, a fourth-year law student, to Today95.1fm that the committee has been pressuring them to withdraw from the race despite their academic records being in good standing. Chisholm further argued that his status as a fourth-year law student operating under an abridged academic calendar does not contravene the electoral guidelines.
The ground for this was the fact that we have an abridged calendar as law students. And first of all, as a law student, I understand the importance of legality. And that's why we've questioned these particular actions of the LECO, that why would they be bringing this at this point in time? Whereas during the publicity of the electoral guidelines, there was nothing like this in the guideline. Neither do we have this in the constitution where they will tell you that a law student in this secondary level cannot contest for any office in the SUG. Also, to buttress our point, we've had situations whereby students have actually vied for several offices and have been disqualified on grounds of CGP and not because of abridged calendar. And that's why we're here to express our dissatisfaction, because this particular action have actually threatened the very fabric of our democratic process in University of Port Harcourt. And students have been reaching out to us in respect to coming out to stage a demonstration to this effect, and we've actually told them to calm down, because as law-abiding citizens that want to ensure that we carry out every necessary means and dialogue possible.
And another student, Samuel Chinedu, a fourth-year nursing sciences student, claimed he was unconstitutionally suspended from his role as the SUG Director of Finance in a bid to stop him from participating in the forthcoming election.
Have, in the process of trying to retain power, done some unconstitutional acts, including suspending me unconstitutionally by using the Senate arm of government to suspend me. I diplomatically wrote to the Dean of Student Affairs. I wrote to the Vice Chancellor. Yes, I'm a 400 level with a CGPA of 4.42. And I'm also calling on this because there are other candidates, there are other aspirants that were also disqualified. They refused to give me the nomination form as an aspirant, and I was not allowed to participate in the electoral process. All I'm saying today is that I was unconstitutionally suspended, and this matter has not just affected me, but have affected other of my colleagues vying for other positions.
The aggrieved students are appealing to the university authorities to intervene, warning that the situation could spark a protest if the alleged injustice is not addressed. The former Rivers Southeast senatorial candidate of the Labour Party in the 2023 general elections, Douglas Fabeke, is calling for collaboration among critical stakeholders for spiritual intervention to restore Rivers State from what he describes as a total leadership collapse. Fabeke, who spoke in an interview with Today FM's Uchende Jo, claimed that the present leadership generation in River State has failed completely and that only divine intervention can enthrone a new generation of leaders for a better River State. Fabeke, who is also the president of the Ogoni Liberation Initiative and national coordinator of United Africa, accused the current leadership of the state of failing in all aspects of governance. He further revealed that there are underground efforts to ensure the emergence of a new and better leadership generation, just as he urged critical stakeholders to come together to support a leadership that would reflect what he described as the vision of God himself.
The solution may not favor the people. The solution may go against some people. So talking about what has happened is just dragging me backwards and sometimes giving some negative information to my brain. I may not be able to think well if I talk about some certain things happening in River State. My vision is the future. What's next? What is the future? What God? What are you saying now? What do we do? That is where I'm aiming at. Yeah, we are on the process. What we are thinking the solution, the generation crash. And when the generation crash, God bring another generation. So this present leadership generation have crashed. And so what God wants to do now is to bring another generation, another leadership generation in River State. We cannot rely on this present one because it's not favorable to the people.
Reactions have continued to trail the recent ruling by a Canadian court declaring Nigeria's two major political parties, the All Progressives Congress and the opposition People's Democratic Party, as terrorist organizations. A stakeholder in River State, Joseph Ile, reacting to the development, described the ruling as disheartening and appalling. Ile noted that the judgment has cast a shadow over the credibility of political actors in both parties and dealt a blow to Nigeria's image on the international stage. Ile, an industrialist, urged stakeholders in Nigeria's political space to take the development seriously, stressing the need for urgent measures to restore the country's reputation and safeguard the integrity of its democratic institutions.
Hearing that a federal court of Canada declared Nigerian ruling party, APC, and PDP, which is the major opposition party, terrorist organization, it is actually very disheartening and appalling seeing how our political class, especially the APC and the PDP that held this country down for good 16 years, how they have demeaned the integrity of Nigeria in the eyes of the international community. For me as a person, make Nigerians' votes to count. Once we get it right in leadership, everything will take its place.
The International Society for Social Justice and Human Rights has condemned the ongoing biometric exercise for civil servants and pensioners in River State, describing it as an act of insensitivity on the part of the state government. The coordinator of the organization, Omenazu Jackson, in an interview with Today FM's Sandra Kenneth, recalled that similar exercises had already been carried out under the administrations of former governors Nyesom Wike and Siminalayi Fubara. Jackson questioned the relevance of the current exercise, asking what became of the previous biometric data. He also challenged the government to explain why it is embarking on another round of verification within such a short period, considering the millions of naira reportedly spent by past administrations on the same process.
It's condemned in the strongest terms the ongoing biometric exercise imposed on River State civil servants and pensioners by the so-called emergency administrator. This initiative is not only insensitive, but also a calculated act of cruelty against the most vulnerable citizens of the state. It is important to state clearly that the government of former Governor Nyesom Wike and the present Governor Fubara has already carried out comprehensive biometric data capturing of both civil servants and pensioners. These verified records have since been used to pay salaries and pensions without hindrance. If such data already exists, why must an interim administrator embark on another round of verification?
Jackson described the current biometric exercise as needless and a mere duplication of existing records. The human rights advocate further argued that the hardship being inflicted on civil servants and pensioners amounts to a gross violation of their rights.
What has happened to the millions of naira invested in the previous biometric exercise? What is playing out today is needless duplication that serves no good, genuine administrative purpose. It has turned into a nightmare for pensioners, men and women who gave their productive years in service of the state. Many of them frail aged and are forced to stand for hours under a scorching sun and rain, some collapsing in the process, while their entitlements are unjustly withheld until the so-called exercise is concluded. This is not reform, this is persecution in disguise.
You're listening to the World News on Today 95.1 FM, Voice of the People. After the break, more news, foreign and sports stories. Do stay with us.
Every day, every hour, when the big stories break, depend on our 24-hour news team to bring you the latest. Today 95.1 FM.
Thank you so much for staying with us. Now the rest of our stories. Some youth from Igbema in Oba Igbema and Doni local government area of River State, under the aegis of the Igbema Youth Council, have threatened to occupy the headquarters of the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC, in Port Harcourt in protest against the alleged abandonment of road projects in their area. The president of the Igbema Youth Council Worldwide, Amatelemawo Sode, confirmed the planned protest in an interview with Today FM, alleging that the abandonment of the Udo Ufunama road project by the NDDC has caused untold hardship to residents and road users. According to Shode, due to the deplorable state of the road, a journey that should ordinarily take 1 hour now lasts between 9 and 10 hours, adding that many vehicle owners suffer frequent damage to their vehicles despite the relatively short distance of the road compared to similar projects completed by the NDDC in other areas. So they further claimed that the people of Igbema in Delta State are the worst affected by the negative impact of the abandoned road, stressing that local economic activities have been crippled. The Igbema Youth Council president also appealed to members of the group to participate in the peaceful protest, describing it as a sacred sacrifice for the development of their fatherland.
From that moment till today, we have not even experienced a reasonable work done on the Ufama road. I mean, the road is a very short road. I think it's 40-something kilometers compared to the road NDDC has embarked on and constructed, completed for other communities. But from that moment they awarded the contract till today. NDDC has not made any reasonable step to make sure the road is being constructed. The said road serves about 200 communities in the Igbema Kingdom. Till this moment, we have different persons to access this road to Edo State, Benin City in particular, but
the River State Police Command has confirmed the gruesome murder of 44-year-old Confidence Sonny was allegedly hacked to death with a machete by her boyfriend Kinsley Chinamezu, popularly known as Pa Sharp. In the statement, the command's public relations officer, SP Gracie Renge Koko, said that on July 30, 2025, in Umwebuli community, Eche local government area, operatives attached to the anti-kidnapping unit acting on intelligence successfully apprehended the suspect. The statement revealed that after committing the heinous act, the suspect fled to Ebeta village in Edo State, where he allegedly issued fresh threats to the victim's family members, boasting that he could still harm them without consequences. SP Iringekuku explained that following a formal complaint by the family and proactive efforts by the police, the Commissioner of Police Olubenga Adeboju assigned the case to the anti-kidnapping unit, whose operatives tracked and arrested the suspect on August 15 at his hideout in Ebeta village in Edo State. According to the statement, the suspect voluntarily confessed to the crime during interrogation, giving detailed accounts of events leading to the murder. Iringekuku added that evidence is being gathered while investigations and profiling continue to determine his possible involvement in other crimes. The statement quoted CP Adeboju, reiterating that River State will never serve as a safe haven for criminals. The leadership and entire membership of Rumu Omakwarowo Woma in Rumodo community, Ogbogoro clan, Obiakwo local government area of River State, have extended heartfelt congratulations to their illustrious son and esteemed member Samuel Oge on his appointment as chairman of the River State Universal Basic Education Board. In their message, the Rumu Omukwaro Oworoma described Oge's appointment as a well-deserved honor and a round peg in a round hole, citing his wealth of managerial experience and proven track record in political leadership. They expressed appreciation to the sole administrator of River State and in particular to the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike, whom they hailed as the political leader of their time, for recognizing Oge's competence and recommending him for the appointment. The community expressed gratitude to God, acknowledging him as the ultimate decider of human destiny, for blessing Oge with health, wisdom, and knowledge that have brought him to this enviable position. They prayed for God's continued guidance, strength, and protection upon him as he assumes his new responsibilities, assuring him of their unwavering support for his success. The statement was jointly signed by Best Man Ovunda, Bemebu Eze, Okechukwu Nwago, Afoma Sunday, Ogunda Njigum, Kinika Oge, and Sonny Njigum, leader of Rumu Omuakwaro Oworoma. The Nigeria Civil Aviation Authority, NCAA, has mandated that all passengers must switch off their phones during civil flights. Speaking at a media conference in Abuja, NCAA Director General Chris Najomo said all phones must be switched off during the critical aspects of flight takeoff and landing in all airports in Nigeria. The directive by the civil aviation regulator followed a recent controversial brawl that involved the passenger Comfort Emerson and an Ibom Air flight attendant. The incident has continued to generate debate in Nigeria. The NCAA boss said this would further put a stop to different rules by airlines, which have caused some sort of confusion among members of late. Meanwhile, the Nigeria Civil Aviation Authority, NCAA, has invited Comfort Emerson and a member of the Ibom Air cabin crew, Juliana Edward, for further investigation into a reported incident aboard an Ibom Air flight from Uyo to Lagos on August 10. This was disclosed by the NCAA's Director of Public Affairs and Consumer Protection, Michael Achimogu, during a question and answer session at the Emergency National Civil Aviation Security Committee and stakeholders meeting held today in Abuja. Achimogu confirmed that he spoke with Emerson earlier and that both she and the crew involved had been summoned for continued inquiry. He clarified that the pilot did not call in security personnel upon landing in Lagos, as the issue seemed resolved during the flight. However, Emerson, who reportedly visited the restroom after landing, was the last to disembark from the aircraft. Assuring the public of transparency, Achimogu said the NCAA remains committed to uncovering all the facts surrounding the incident. And on the foreign scene, Russians have welcomed the idea of a meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky, though not everyone was convinced it would bring peace after nearly 3.5 years of conflict. After meeting Putin in Alaska on Friday and Zelensky in Washington on Monday, U.S. President Donald Trump announced he would arrange face-to-face talks between the two leaders, their first in almost 6 years. Ukraine cut diplomatic ties with Russia after Putin sent troops into Ukraine in February 2022, and the two leaders have had no direct contact since. Russia hoped to take Kiev in days after launching its offensive in 2022, but put back from the Ukrainian capital after encountering stiff resistance. Its forces have since seized large swathes of the east and south of the country, while tens of thousands of soldiers have died on both sides. To end the news, here is a summary of the major stories. RISIEC has concluded its second training for coalition officers ahead of the August 30 local government elections. A human rights group has questioned the sole administrator's intent for the renewed verification exercise for River State civil servants and pensioners. You heard that the NCAA has insisted that passengers must switch off their phones during flights. Another foreign scene, we told you that Russians have welcomed the idea of Putin and Zelensky's meeting. And that was the news as edited by Funanya Obemendekwe. For comments and inquiries, please call 0818-389-2850 or send your emails to news@todayfmlive.com. You can also read our stories on www.todayfmlive.com. My name is Queen Chima. Thank you so much for listening. Good evening.
Today's news, today's entertainment, today's sports, today's issues. Today on Today 95.1 FM, Port Harcourt.
Good evening, this is Today 95.1 FM Port Harcourt, Voice of the People, and it's time again for a rundown of the foreign news stories that made the headlines on the world today. I am Queen Chima. In the headlines, Burkina Faso junta expels top UN official over children in wartime report. France calls for sanctions against Russia if diplomacy fails. Russia returns bodies of 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers. Canada and flight attendants reach tentative deal to end strike. Now the news in detail. Burkina Faso's junta has declared the top president United Nations official persona non grata for UN reports which found that armed groups were recruiting children to fight in the country's jihadist conflict. Since seizing power in a coup, the Burkina junta has placed international organizations and humanitarian bodies under increasing pressure as the Sahel nation faces a widespread jihadist insurgency. In a statement, the military government said the UN resident humanitarian coordinator, Carol Flor Smerchniak, must leave because of her responsibility in drafting the March report, which it said contained baseless allegations that Burkina Faso's army and defense forces were also violating the human rights of children. Most of the recorded instances of child recruitment were by Al-Qaeda-linked group for the support of Islam and Muslims, known by its Arabic acronym JINIM, with the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara ISGS group also implicated. However, the report also found that the defense and security forces, as well as its civilian auxiliaries, the volunteers for the defense of the nation, were responsible for a fifth of the grave violations the UN investigators had registered. According to the investigators, members of volunteers for the defense of the nation were responsible for kidnapping 23 children, as well as 4 of the 20 counts of rape they managed to verify. Congolese authorities said Rwanda-backed rebels have killed at least 80 people in eastern Congo in recent weeks, despite the ongoing Qatar-led peace process aiming to end the conflict. The army in a statement said that it is fiercely condemning a series of mass murders of civilians by the RDF M23 AFC coalition in South Kivu, including 80 people in the village of Inyaborongo, and of 6 civilians, including 2 minors, on July 24 in the village of Lubinshi. The statement said the continuing violence could threaten Qatar-led efforts to get Congo and the rebels to sign a permanent peace deal. Earlier this month, the UN Human Rights Chief said that M23 killed 319 people over the past month in a different part of the region, describing the toll as one of the largest documented in such attacks since the M23 rebels resurfaced in 2022. French President Emmanuel Macron has called for stepping up sanctions against Russia if its leader Vladimir Putin does not move forward on peace with Ukraine. Macron told newsmen that President Donald Trump believes that they can get an agreement and also believes that President Putin also wants a peace accord. He pointed to recent secondary sanctions imposed by the Trump administration on India, which has emerged as a major buyer of Russian energy as Western nations cut back due to sanctions following Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Trump invited Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to the White House 3 days after the U.S. president welcomed Putin for talks in Alaska. Over the weekend, Trump publicly again pressured Ukraine to concede territory, siding with Putin and not Zelensky, who has insisted on defending all territory which Russia has taken by force. He said that Trump and the European leaders also agreed that there can be no restrictions on the size of Ukraine's military in a future deal with Russia. Ukrainian government agency said Russia has returned the bodies of what it said were 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers, 5 of whom died while in captivity. A Russian official also said Ukraine returned the bodies of 19 Russian soldiers in exchange. Tens of thousands of soldiers have been killed on both sides since Russia invaded its neighbor in February 2022. The exchange of prisoners of war and repatriation of war dead has been one of the few areas of cooperation between the two countries since the war began. The two sides have intensified these efforts in recent months during talks in Istanbul. According to the Russian side, 1,000 bodies belonging to Ukrainian military personnel have been returned to Ukraine. Ukraine's coordination headquarters for the treatment of prisoners of war said in a statement on Telegram. It said law enforcement would begin the process of identifying the soldiers. Russian negotiator Vladimir Medinsky said the exchange was carried out in accordance with agreements reached between the two sides in Istanbul. While in Canada, where Air Canada's strike has ended after flight attendants reached a tentative agreement with the airline, Air Canada said it would gradually restart operations today, but that a return to full restoration may require a week or more. More than 10,000 flight attendants walked off the job early Saturday over pay and scheduling disputes. The Canadian Industrial Relations Board directed Air Canada and Air Canada Rouge flight attendants to resume their duties by Sunday after Jobs Minister Patty Hajdu imposed binding arbitration and extended the existing contract until a new agreement is reached. But the Canadian Union of Public Employees called the order blatantly unconstitutional and said its members would remain on strike. In a statement, the Union Secretary and Treasurer Candice Rennick said the government's order was a disgraceful misuse of power that reeks of systemic bias and corporate favoritism. The airline estimated a 500,000 customers' flight had been cancelled because of the strike. In Hong Kong, 2 pro-democracy activists have been granted asylum separately in the UK and Australia, prompting anger from the Chinese Special Administrative Region's government. Hong Kong summoned Australian and British envoys who were warned by Chief Secretary Chan Kwun-ki against harbouring offenders. Former lawmaker Ted Hu and student leader Tony Chung announced over the weekend that have been granted asylum in Australia and the UK. They were sentenced to jail under national security law that Beijing says is necessary to maintain stability in the city. However, critics say the law is being used to crush dissent and instill a climate of fear. Hu fled Hong Kong in December 2020 while facing charges for his involvement in anti-government protests the year before. Chung left in 2023, citing an enormous amount of stress from constant police scrutiny. The Middle East Arab mediators are awaiting a formal response from Israel after Hamas said it had accepted a new proposal for a Gaza ceasefire and hostage release deal. The plan was presented by Qatar and Egypt, which are trying to avert a major new Israeli offensive to occupy Gaza fully. In recent days, Israel's government has said it would no longer accept a partial deal, only a comprehensive one that would see all the hostages freed. Later this week, the Israeli cabinet is expected to approve the military's plan to occupy Gaza City, where intensifying Israeli strikes have already prompted thousands of people to flee. Myanmar's junta says the country's long-promised elections will start on December 28, despite a raging civil war that has put much of the country out of its control and international monitors slating the poll as a charade. Myanmar has been consumed by conflict since the military deposed the government of Democratic leader Aung San Suu Kyi in 2021, making unsubstantiated allegations of electoral fraud. Swathes of the country are beyond military control, administered by a myriad of pro-democracy guerrillas and powerful ethnic armed organizations which have pledged to block polls in their enclaves. Myanmar's civil war has killed thousands, left more than half the nation in poverty, and displaced more than 3.5 million people living displaced. The junta has touted elections as a way to end the conflict and offered cash rewards to opposition fighters willing to lay down their arms ahead of the vote. However, Suu Kyi remains jailed, while many opposition lawmakers ousted by the coup are boycotting it. In Pakistan, where fresh torrential rains in northern Pakistan have killed at least 20 people, as the region is ravaged by an unusually intense monsoon season that has left more than 300 people dead in recent days. Torrential rains across the country's north have caused flooding and landslides that have swept away entire villages, leaving many residents trapped in the rubble and around 200 still missing. Officials said several villages were wiped out by the huge amount of rain falling in a short period of time. Since the first heavy rains last Thursday, most of the deaths, more than 340, were reported in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Well, the story from Pakistan concludes tonight's edition of The World Today, as produced by Odinakachi Celesting of the News Department. But before we go, here is a summary of the stories that made the headlines. We told you that Burkina Faso junta has expelled top UN official over children in wartime report. You heard that France has called for sanctions against Russia if diplomacy fails. We also told you that Russia has returned the bodies of 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers. Finally, Air Canada flight attendants have reached a tentative deal to end strike. Till same time tomorrow. Do have a lovely night. Thank you so much for listening.
Today's news, today's entertainment, today's sports, today's issues. Today on Today 95.1 FM, Port Harcourt.
Talk radio. I listen to a lot of talk radio.
95.1 FM.
BBC World Service. I'm Audrey Brown in London with focus on Africa. No peace deal between M23 rebels and the government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Over the last 6 weeks, we've seen all sides violating the ceasefire, massacres of civilians by the M23, and so we may have had our hopes up really based on very little, actually.
From Malawi, is climate change forcing girls into getting married way too young to try and help save their families? And we explore the role of matrilineal leadership within patriarchal power structures in Ghana.
The chieftaincy system has a chief and a queen mother as a dual gender system, so they both have power. The queen mother is supposed to advise the chief, and the chief is supposed to listen to her.
A real-life queen mother will tell us how she sees her role. That's all on the BBC Tonight in Focus. First, the news.
BBC News with Sue Montgomery. President Trump has said he doesn't think it would be a problem that European powers wanted to have troops on the ground in Ukraine to guarantee its security in any peace deal. He told Fox News channels Fox and Friends he thought President Putin was tired of the war, but he considered that the Russian leader might not want a deal. He also repeated that Ukraine would not join NATO.
It can't be NATO because that's just not something that would ever happen. They couldn't do that. I mean, if you were Russia, who would want to have your enemy, your opponent, sitting on your line? You don't do that.
From the White House, here's Bernd de Busman.
He also expressed kind of his belief that President Zelensky, for one, needs to be very flexible in terms of what he's asking for. In the past, Zelensky had said that he doesn't foresee any future in which he's permitted by Ukraine's constitution to give away Ukrainian territory, whereas in President Trump's mind, the swap of land taken and held by Ukraine and Russia is kind of a key part of this deal. But without Russian buy-in to this, it's really unclear how far this can go.
Russia has hit Ukrainian gas and oil facilities in the central region of Poltava, causing large fires. One was in the industrial city of Kremenchuk, the site of an oil refinery. Russia's Ministry of Defense said it struck an unspecified refinery that supplied fuel for Ukrainian troops. Ukraine has attacked and set ablaze a train transporting fuel in the Russian-occupied part of Zaporizhia and an oil refinery in Russia's Volgograd region. Israeli officials have said the government will only agree to a Gaza ceasefire if all 50 remaining hostages are released. The comments came after a proposal involving a 60-day truce and the release of half of the hostages. Imer Nader has more details.
That isn't an explicit rejection of the proposal that we heard from Hamas yesterday, but it does suggest that it's going to cast doubt on the proposal, and it suggests that Israel would like to renegotiate the terms of this proposal, which had previously, as recently as last month, been agreed to by Israel and was the basis of the negotiation talks. And what we've been hearing from this official in the Prime Minister's office does seem to chime with the messaging we've heard from the Prime Minister Netanyahu and other Israeli ministers in recent days.
The European Union says it's appalled by Israel's demolition of a school in the north of the occupied West Bank. The school was under construction in the village of Al-Aqaba and was funded by the EU and France to teach hundreds of students from Palestinian communities. A statement said the EU expected its investments to be protected in accordance with international law. World News from the BBC. The US Director of National Intelligence says Britain has dropped a controversial demand for Apple to supply it with the protected and encrypted data of American citizens. Zoe Kleinman has more details.
The UK government's demand to be able to access Apple users' data in the event of a perceived national security risk was supposed to be legally kept secret. Neither Apple nor the Home Office has ever confirmed its existence. The US administration had been openly critical of the instruction, although there's already a data sharing agreement in place between the two countries. But in order to comply, Apple would have had to break its own encryption methods, which it said it would never do. So instead, it removed its toughest data protection tool from the UK market and took legal action against the government.
Fears are growing for a Russian mountaineer who's been stopped for a week on a peak in Kyrgyzstan at an altitude of over 7,000 metres with a broken leg. The authorities are still trying to rescue Natalia Nagovitsina, who's had to rely on a sleeping bag for shelter. Bad weather has thwarted previous attempts to rescue her by helicopter.
Data in the event of a perceived national security risk was supposed to be legally kept secret. Neither Apple nor the Home Office has ever confirmed its existence. The US administration had been openly critical of the instruction, although there's already a data sharing agreement in place between the two countries. But in order to comply, Apple would have had to break its own encryption methods, which it said it would never do. So instead, it removed its toughest data protection tool from the UK market and took legal action against the government.
Fears are growing.
Yet another setback. The M23 rebel group says it won't go back to Doha to continue talking peace. The rebels say the government is not respecting conditions to bring the war to an end. The Congolese government and the M23 had signed a declaration of principles last month with the aim of concluding a peace agreement yesterday. A bit of background, this particular battle has been raging since the end of 2021, when the M23, with the help of Rwanda, captured vast territories in Kivu, the provinces in the east. The cost to civilians in the region has been immense, with rape and pillage being the order of the day. Tens of thousands of people have fled to neighboring countries. Among them is Harriet, a mother who has spent months on edge, fearing for her life and for the safety of her daughters. She recently crossed the border into Uganda. Her experiences are harrowing, so you may want to skip the next bit while she tells us what's been happening to her and her community.
They're raping women. I live with my daughters, and I was afraid they could come for them, and me too. So I thought I should flee with my girls to a peaceful and more secure place. They used to go from house to house asking for money, and when you refuse, they kill you. That is what happened to my son. He told them he did not have any money, and they shot him and killed him. I can finally sleep. Since I came here, I have managed to at least close my eyes. There is no sleeping in Congo. If we could have stayed there, we would have died. For now, we can eat, we can sleep, and it feels so good.
That's Harriet. A new surge in fighting erupted earlier this year when the M23 seized the key cities of Goma and Bukavu, establishing its own administrations. Hopes rose tentatively when Qatar offered to host talks for peace. Another front for peace opened when the U.S. Special Envoy for Africa visited the DRC and offered to host talks between President Tshisekedi and Rwanda's President Paul Kagame, a major player in the conflict. We will touch on both tracks for potential peace, but Stephanie Walters, the head of the Peace and Security Research Program at the South African Institute of International Affairs, dealt mainly with the passing of the deadline for the Doha talks in a conversation I had with her. So, what is behind the impasse between the government and the M23?
In many ways, this doesn't come as a surprise. Over the last 6 weeks, we've seen the ceasefire that was put in place absolutely not hold, all sides violating the ceasefire, massacres of civilians by the M23, 300 people being killed last month, the M23 capturing new territory in South Kivu, and so on and so forth. So the military situation on the ground hasn't changed whatsoever. And I think that tells us a lot about the intentions of the two parties to really respect this declaration of intentions that they had signed earlier, and the fact that that declaration doesn't have a whole lot of meat on it. And so we may have had our hopes up really based on very little, actually.
So they were supposed to take place in Doha, these negotiations, but the M23 rebel group said that they are not coming unless the principles aimed at ending the war were fully respected by the government. But it seems like they are accusing the government of not respecting a ceasefire. What about them? Do they have any right to point fingers?
Well, I think, look, one of the things that was concrete was that there was meant to be the liberation of prisoners, of some of the M23 prisoners. And there have been meetings to that effect, and I think the International Red Cross has been involved in some of that. That hasn't come to a conclusion yet, but clearly it speaks to a level of confidence between the two sides. You can see why Kinshasa might not be willing to go ahead with releasing prisoners while the M23 is still capturing territory on the ground, and, vice versa. So I think both sides have acted in bad faith. And I think it tells us a lot about, again, their readiness to really sit down and put an end to this ongoing situation.
You spoke about the heart of the matter. What is the heart of the matter?
Part of the problem here is that we have different actors in this conflict speaking to each other in different fora. So we've got the M23 talking to the Congolese government in Doha. The M23 are a Rwandan-backed rebel movement, and yet Rwanda's not at those talks. Then we have in D.C. a forum where we have Rwanda speaking directly to the DRC about their issues, but where the M23 and their role is not openly spoken about.
Rwanda has, though, in recent months, acknowledged the connection with the M23, hasn't it? Even if it's done so, not, chest out, but more tacitly.
Yeah, in a way. Of course, it's all smoke and mirrors, right? Or semantics at this point. The fact that Rwanda's sitting at a table, across the table from the Kinshasa and DC, means that it is acknowledging that it is playing a role in the conflict, although it won't speak openly about how it supports the M23. I think the issue, though, is that Rwanda is saying we are in the DRC because we have security concerns, and it throws us back to this issue about the FDLR, who have been, of course, in eastern DRC since 1994, this, the remnants of the Rwandan Hutu genocidaire. And Rwanda has, for 3 decades now, used that as a pretext to continue to interfere in eastern Congo. And M23 is very much a proxy movement that allows it to do that. And if we look at the most recent UN panel of experts reports that came out in July, where even they are saying, this goes well beyond those security concerns. There's a real attempt to establish territorial control by imposing the M23 as an administrator in large parts of North and to some extent South Kivu.
And the reason why they're there, besides the security concerns, is it about the mineral wealth in that part of the country?
I think the mineral wealth is not irrelevant. I don't think it's the primary reason. Till this day, I've never found anybody who can answer the question of what exactly is the end game for Paul Kagame, what is the end game for Rwanda. But Rwanda clearly thinks that the eastern DRC is a sphere of influence it should have control over. And so some of that is about mineral wealth. But Rwanda benefits from Congolese mineral wealth even when there isn't conflict. So it's not the only thing. Rwanda does have ambitions to control territory in eastern DRC. Not all of the reasons are clear to us exactly why it wants to do that, but that is very much what we're seeing in this conflict.
Stephanie Walters, head of the Peace and Security Research Program at the South African Institute of International Affairs. When we think of marriage in a conventional sense, we're thinking that love is the major motivation. But so very often, marriage isn't about love. For many, it's about survival. And in the story you're about to hear, climate change has a lot to do with it. Nearly 2/3 of all child marriages now happen in regions facing severe climate risks, according to the NGO Save the Children. One area where this is happening is Mangochi, located on the southern shores of Lake Malawi. It's a beautiful part of the world with stunning lake views, beaches, and a rich cultural heritage. But over the past few years, the town has been affected by frequent droughts. And with many people relying on fishing or agriculture for their livelihoods, climate change is pushing more of them into poverty. As a result, young girls are being married younger as a way of helping their families cope. Our reporter, Anne Okumu, recently traveled to Mangochi to hear from people like 16-year-old Hava, who got married earlier this year. She calls this decision hers, but she was underage when she got married.
Things have been changing over the years. Some days my father would come back home with nothing from the lake. There's been lots of hunger. He cannot pay my school fees. At school they laugh at me. It's very tough. I decided to get married because I want to help my parents. If we had everything at home, I would have loved to continue with my education, become a teacher, and better my life.
Anne also asked Hawa's father if he had tried to stop her when she said she wanted to get married.
It hurt me to see her make that decision, but I was concerned. I would have loved her to continue with her education. Before, I used to bring up to 3 buckets of fish, but now it is hard to get even a plate. We go to the lake at around 4 a.m. and come back with nothing.
Anne and I continued talking about what she found in Mangochi.
In Mangochi district, there has been a mix of different effects of climate change. There's extreme heat, which is causing drought in the area. And also speaking to some locals, they say because the temperatures of the waters are so high, fishing activities have been impacted. So most of the people in the community depend on farming and fishing as sources of livelihood. But because of the extreme heat, the number of fish has gone down. Farming is not sustainable. So this has pushed many families into poverty because they're not making ends meet. They're no longer selling their produce. They're no longer selling fish. So it has pushed most of them into poverty.
And why is child marriage seen as a solution?
So when we're speaking to some of the community members, most of them have families up to 8 people, 7 people, 6 people. And they said it's too many mouths to feed and too many children to take to school with no income, with no sustainable source of income that's coming in for them. As we spoke to Hawa's family, they said sometimes they don't eat in a day because they are sort of rationing food. So they eat today and tomorrow they don't eat. So there's enough food to go around. So when we spoke to her, she said for her, it felt like she was struggling to eat in her family. So she thought maybe if she gets married to this guy, it's just 2 months to feed at this point, so it becomes easier for them.
So somebody like Hawa would see it as a way of helping a family and being compelled by the circumstances rather than the family forcing her into that situation. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, and it's something that's happening not just in Hawa's family. The chief of the area called it like a pandemic that's happening among girls. It's also something to do with peer pressure because this girl goes and gets married and comes and talks to another girl. So they are trying to sort of convince each other to get themselves into these marriages to make lives a little bit better for themselves.
Can you give us an idea of how the authorities in the area are trying to deal with this issue and how it's regarded by, those partners that are trying to help to stop child marriages?
We have this human rights activist. His name is Macbain Mkandawiri. He's one who's working with the government of Malawi and the local chief in Mangochi to try and curb child marriages.
The law that we have in this country, starting with the Child Justice Act, the amended constitution, all those speak to protecting the girl child. But then the traditional law or customary law does not take that into consideration. After withdrawing them from child marriages, there is no support. The legal framework provides that we will arrest the person and goes to court, is convicted. But who supports the child?
And that's Macbain Mkandawire there. How prevalent was child marriage in Mangochi up to now? Because I know that governments around Africa had actually been trying to stamp out child marriage to give girls a better chance to get themselves educated, going to school and, improving their lives and the lives of the families in that way.
It's a big issue that I think the chief and the human rights expert Mark Bain are trying to handle because when we talked to him, said in Mangochi itself, 200 cases are being reported yearly. They're still trying to figure out how to sort it because there's a conflict between the law in Malawi and a conflict between the customary laws.
Tell us exactly what the law actually says. Like who is considered a child in this particular instance when it comes to this law being applied?
So in Malawi, the age of consent is 16, but the legal age of marriage is 18. And the law, the constitution recognizes the legal marriages and it recognizes customary marriages. Now the conflict comes in because there's the customary law. In most African communities have customary laws. And because the law does not criminalize, it prohibits, but it does not criminalize marriage under 18. So in as much as it's not allowed to happen, there's no arrest that can be made. It's only made when in a case where the girl or the parties in question are below 16, which now becomes a sexual offense.
What about going to the heart of the problem being that climate change is so drastically affecting people's lives that we find ourselves with the kind of social issue that we're dealing with now, child marriages. Are there any mitigating programs that the government is trying to introduce?
When we were there, they was talking about issues of food insecurities, getting the community members to engage into different activities other than fishing and farming.
That's the BBC's Anne Okumu, and she was in Mangochi on the shores of Lake Malawi. Now imagine a crowded courtyard in Kumasi, Ghana. Chiefs draped in gold-adorned cloth sit in state. Drums thunder into the air, and a young woman kneels before her elders. This is the enstallment ceremony, and the young woman in question is about to become a queen mother. It's one of the most powerful, yet least understood roles in Ashanti society, a major ethnic group among the Akan people of Ghana. This August, Ghana mourned the passing of Nana Konadu Yadom II, the 14th Asante Ima, Queen Mother of the Ashanti Kingdom. She was 98 years old, and her stool, or throne, is considered one of the most important among the Akan people of Ghana. Queen mothers operate within a complex structure of patriarchal power at both the local and national level. So how do they do it? We'll discuss that at length shortly, but we also had the pleasure of speaking to a newly installed Queen Mother, not as big as that of the late Nana Konadu Yadom, but hefty in its own right. Chanel Boateng became Nana Ama Oforiwa II earlier this year, installed or crowned in the town of Kona. She's an entrepreneur who grew up here in the UK, and she can trace her lineage back to King Nana Prempeh I, who, along with Queen Mother Ya Asantewa, resisted British colonial rule. Let's hear more from Chanel Boateng, or to give her full title, Nana Ama Oforiwa II. So how do Queen Mothers exercise matriarchal power in a patriarchal system?
A Queen Mother is also called an Oba Penny, that is typically the female head of a royal household.
So what does a Queen Mother do?
Let's just break it down. So in the war days, they typically would actually go to war, so they're actually warriors. So
they lead forces into
they,
battle, which is the one Queen Mother that practically everybody who knows anything about Ghana would know, would be Ya Asantewa. Yeah, because she fought for the restoration of the Golden Stool and the colonial powers. She fought them.
Absolutely.
And went into exile in Mauritius.
Oh, Seychelles.
Seychelles, sorry, not Mauritius.
Yes, with my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, King Prempeh I.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, so I suppose this brings us on to how did you become Queen Mother?
It's kind of like a personal journey for me. You know, when you go through certain awakenings and you just kind of want to understand yourself a bit deeper. You know, I've been through certain challenges in life and I'm at the stage where I'm like, who am I? I would say that my parents did install in us, you know, growing up the Ghanaian culture and lifestyle, although, you know, we grew up here in London. And I just went on a quest as to kind of asking questions and finding out more. And I do community, like philanthropic stuff. And I wanted to kind of establish a bit more of that, a part of, you know, my online platform and just involving and investing into the community back home. And so a friend of mine who happens to be a royal in the Bront Ahafo region.
Been there.
Oh, have you? Oh, my gosh.
I know Ghana quite well.
Wow. So I went there. I met with the chiefs and queen mothers there. And they honestly very quickly offered me to be an Nkoswahima. It's a type of installment. So you can be an Nkoswahini or Nkoswahima, which is still kind of like a queen mother or like a chief.
That's not hereditary. That's bestowed upon you.
Exactly.
So the hereditary bit for you, how did you come to that?
So when I'm telling my mom and that, oh my gosh, like this town wants to make me an Nkoswahima. This is exciting. And my mom's like an Asante woman. She's like, you're Asante, Chanel. You're actually from a royal home. So let me introduce you to your uncle, Nana Benkumhini of Kona. Have a chat with him, because if you're going to be a queen mother and you're so keen, it's better you kind of go through the right channels. This is a maternal bloodline thing.
That's Chanel Boateng, Nana Ama Oforiwa II. For a broader view on this, the anthropologist Beverly Stuhlke, Professor Emerita at Indiana University, has been leading us through the history of Queen Mothers and whether they are as relevant to younger generations in Ghana today as they were historically.
Queen mothers are a part of the chieftaincy system, and this system is very, very old. It goes into prehistory, and it is shared by all of the Akan groups. There are perhaps 10 or 15 different Akan groups, and the Asante, only one of those groups, but they are by far the most powerful, the best known, and the only ones with a chief at the top. Some people call him a king, and he is the Asante Hene. He is the chief of all the Asante people. The chieftaincy system has a chief and a queen mother as a dual gender system, so they both have power. They each have their own stool.
Just tell us about the stool quickly.
The stool has always been the symbol of a power. It's kind of a curved stool, and it has a special design in the middle that holds up the seat part of the stool. And everybody has stools in their houses, but also stool is the symbol of authority. Every town, every village, every paramountcy has its own chief and queen mother.
What powers does the queen mother have?
The queen mother is supposed to advise the chief, and the chief is supposed to listen to her. She is supposed to have wisdom and knowledge. In order to be a chief or a queen mother, you have to be a member of the royal family in your particular town or paramountcy, and that is determined by the clan that you belong to, and your family is determined through your mother. And so that's why this is a matrilineal system.
This leads me on to actually talking about the post-colonial political system was patriarchal. Can you just tell us a little bit more about how that fit into how Ghana's political arrangements then were affected?
In 1701, that's when the Asante people organized themselves into a state. It took on what I think are features of modern systems. Okomfonoche, who was a powerful priest, brought down from heaven a golden stool, and he said, this stool, it represents all of Asante, your soul and your identity and your power. And so the administration of the Asante state is very patrilineal. The Asante Hene can put his sons, grandsons, nephews, relatives, and so on.
Which leads to a patriarchal system of exercising power and diminishing and dismissing women and women's forms of power.
Yes, and there is a woman named Ama Agnes Aidu. She's a historian, although I think she went to work for the UN. But anyway, she did a fascinating dissertation, and she points that out, that the Asante state did not give any position to women. Although the queen mothers, of course, were still there, and so some of them were incredibly powerful.
That was the anthropologist Beverly Stuhlke, Professor Emerita at the University of Indiana. Focus on Africa was produced by Yvette Twagira Maria, Priya Sipi, and Stefania Okereke here in London. Paul Chibinga was the senior producer, and Francesca Dunn, our technical producer. Our editors are Mariam Abdallah, Andre Lombard, and Alice Mudengi. I'm Audrey Brown. Till next time, thanks for listening.
Today is business. Today is a new trend for your businesses. We give you all the information you need to grow your business, new ideas and innovations that keep you earning more and staying relevant.
Every day we engage in business, buying and selling, trading and exchanging of services as individuals or as a country. Money goes round, it goes up and down. But have you ever wondered what business is all about? And have you ever wondered how you can stand out in your business?
Today FM has got you covered every Wednesday between the hours of 1 p.m. to 2 p.m.
Learn all you need from professionals on how the country runs its business affairs and how you can be an outstanding entrepreneur and grow your business.
Business Today.
What's a successful business without sales? And what is sales without an audience? Well, do you know that you can reach 8 million listeners across 6 states in 2 geopolitical zones all at once? How? With Today 95.1 FM, you can get millions of people to know about your business. And what does that mean to you? More sales. Call 081 389-2850 now for more information.
Tune in for a journey beyond the ordinary.
Fasten your seatbelts.
We are not just a station, we are the station. Today, 95.1 FM, the voice of the people.
The station with the...
As the voice of the people, we make sure that no one misses out. On Today 95.1 FM, there's something for everyone.
Our tech show, because tech is new money. Our kids show, because we love the little ones.
Our Gospelration, because it's the moment of truth. Our High Life show, because high life is vintage.
Our sports show with the adrenaline. Our midnight show, because we care about your love life.
Our Nostalgia Drive, because old is gold. Our show for young people, because Gen Z code is on.
Our Pidgin Bit, because na Naija we dey. Our book review, because books are a mirror. Our big stories, because big things only.
Our health shows with seasoned health experts, because we care that you're healthy. Our eyewitness report, because we want to hear from you. Our reggae show, because Rastafari.
One love.
Tune in for a journey beyond the ordinary.
Fasten your seatbelts.
We are not just a station, we are the station. Today, 95.1 FM, the voice of the people.